Hello and welcome to How to Tell Good Stories number 11. Today we're speaking with comic writer and publisher Nick Gibson of the Phoenix Press and 2100 Samurai issue number 2, which is funding currently on Indiegogo. And so I welcome to the show Nick Gibson to talk about telling good stories. Hey Nick, how's it going, my man?
Pretty good, pretty good. How you doing tonight?
It is what it is, man. It's one of the few nights I'm been tired. Like normally I'm really awake at this time, but I've been really tired today, so I have no idea why. But
Yeah, I know how you
here it is.
feel. The heat just kind of like saps my energy, and it's up here in Michigan. It's just been scorcher. It's like 90-degree days, day in and day out.
Right? Yeah, that is true. It's definitely heat has been something. But so yeah, I remember of course this came about quick. I literally just tonight said, "Hey, want to do something?" I said, "Yep, we'll do it." But oddly enough, I do actually remember seeing you some months back in somebody's chat, and I don't remember where,
Hmm.
what chat that I saw you in someone's chat, and then um, with talking to a couple different people here and there, some people have spoken well of you, so I'm looking forward to talking
That's good
about
to know.
writing. Yeah, yeah. So we're gonna get to talk about writing and visual storytelling.
hmm
But first, tell us about yourself a little bit. Specifically, when did you uh, start telling stories or start doing art, or whichever came first, however that worked about?
Well, my name is Nick Gibson, and I was always kind of a storyteller. Like I didn't really have any friends growing up to kind of just be in my backyard, kind of just putting myself into different places. Like one day I'd be galloping around Hyrule on my wooden horse, which in reality was like a stick or something, or like all these different kinds of stories, and eventually I kind of parlayed that into telling my own stuff, and then I didn't really kind of get serious until like my junior or senior year of high school. I wrote some kind of short stories, kind of just to test myself, and
Mm-hmm.
those kind of turned out fairly well. And then from there, I created my first comic turned samurai. So yeah, this comic's actually been in the mixer for over a decade and a half. It's crazy. Um, and then I created some more comic strips after that. Eventually, I got picked up by a publisher, here locally. He kind of mentored me for about a decade or so, and then around 2018, 2019, ended up striking out on my own, creating the Phoenix Press, and from there I started making comics, and that's led me to where I am now.
Okay. So, was it always comics for you, or was there a time were you a TV watcher? Did you grow up on TVs, movies, novels, whatever, or has it always been comics?
It's been a wide variety of things like TV, movies, music. I actually also play guitar, so that's also like I'm very multi talented. Video games, I try to pull as much from a wide variety of sources as I can.
Hmm. Okay. And so, what would you say was your favorite character or favorite storyline or just favorite comic when you
As
were
far as
younger?
comics go, it would probably have to be um, during my teenage years. It was definitely Nightwing,
Okay.
like the original Chuck Dixon run, and then later the Devin Grayson run.
Oh,
Late '90s, early 2000s. Those are heavily influential. A lot of Chuck Dixon's work, and then also New Teen Titans by George Perez and Marv Wolfman was also a big one. I'm a big DC nerd. Some X Men. I can't really name any specific authors, but like a lot of the Batman stuff. And then probably Ultimate Spider-Man, the original Bendis, as well as Ultimate X-Men is some other stuff that I remember being big fans of.
hmm, yeah. And so yeah, that's interesting because you see, I was a I guess everybody knows who Superman and Batman are, and I did
Mm-hmm.
I did like Batman a lot, but I was more of a Marvel guy. kid growing up. I get, and more, but just by sheer chance of that's what was at our usually at the comic shop that I went to, or the store where I went
Right.
to buy stuff. I mean, it's weird because I always talk about the coverless comics because our LCS, after he'd rip the covers off and send them back to get his reimbursement for the covers, he would sell the comics for $3 in the front, and so any three you'd get would be for $1. And almost always it was Spider-Man and Hulk, or Spider-Man and uh, X-Men was pretty much what was in the front.
My theory for that is maybe because like there was like a billion Spider-Man titles at the time.
Yeah, probably. Well, this was I know when I first started reading it was the adjectiveless Spider-Man that they started specifically for
Todd.
McFarlane to do.
Yeah, I owned the first issue for a while.
Yeah, and so
now if you want to talk about visual storytelling, I could do a whole diatribe on that first issue.
Yeah, but so yeah, it's interesting that of course DC up until probably 15 or, well, I guess in the 90s Marvel kind of took over a lot of that, but DC has really been the brand that everybody recognizes forever. It's been, even when people don't recognize Marvel, even 25 years ago, when people might not know who Marvel is, but they would know what DC Comics was. And
well, I'd argue people didn't necessarily know the Marvel brand, but they knew certain characters like Spider-Man and the X-Men were front and center. Because like in the 90s you had the X-Men cartoon, you had the Spider-Man cartoon, and in the 2000s you had the movies.
But those had to happen for that to become the thing. Prior to say 93, if you asked somebody to name you 5 comic book characters, you probably would get all of DC. You'd probably get Batman, Superman, the Flash, Wonder Woman. You'd get all DC characters.
I'd have to take your word for it, because in 1993 I was 5 years old and I wasn't as active as you were, so I'd have to I can only speak for like late 90s and 2000s is really when I was most active.
Yeah, in the mid 90s, Stan Lee and Marvel in general made a push, and they pretty much became it. I mean, when they got all the guys ended up eventually, of course, leaving. Will Spatasio between, of course, you get like said Todd McFarlane and all that.
Yeah, that was like late 80s, early 90s that Image was created, right?
Yeah, and that was right at that time. But the thing was, there was about a 3-year period there where all the superstars were at Marvel. Yeah, and then all of a sudden they all left. But the thing is they left. That doesn't mean nothing, because most comics back then were evergreen. You could leave them on the shelf and somebody would pick up a Todd McFarlane Spider-Man, or a X-Men drawn by Jim Lee, and they'd pick it up. Doesn't matter if it was a year old. They see that and they're like, oh wow, and they pick it up and read it. So
another thing to keep in mind is this was like in the midst of the speculator bubble, so people would buy anything that they thought they could make a buck off of.
It's basically what started the speculator, is because of that. But yeah. So the thing is we're going to move forward a little bit and just kind of go with were you always a storyteller, or did you start writing just like, in school, or start, whatever, those prompts that they'll give you, or how did the writing part develop?
Like probably, like the writing prompts and kind of me kind of discovering like, hey, I'm actually kind of decent at this stuff. So like I said, I kind of wrote some short stories, kind of give myself a trial. And then kind of like the process of exploring different mediums. Like I wrote, like I started to write novels, like there was a fantasy novel I started at, poems, song lyrics, just kind of finding what I'm good at. And then, comic book scripts, it turns out I was actually pretty decent at those. I mean, obviously I've gotten a lot better. I mean, when I look back at some of that, I still have some of my very early scripts, and I mean, obviously, it's kind of a sign of progress where you look at your old stuff, be like, "Holy crap! What the frick was I thinking?"
Right.
But But yeah, and that's kind of things have been kind of progressed from there. And you know, I don't know. To me, writing just comes as easy as breathing, really.
Okay. So, do you have a genre that you prefer to write in, or is it just a style that you prefer to write in, or how
As far
about?
as genre, I mostly find myself most comfortable in sci-fi and its derivatives. I tend to kind of keep myself under that umbrella. Like I've done fantasy, but fantasy. I mean, I like fantasy. I could probably do fantasy, but like I feel like every time I do fantasy, it's very cliche and surface level. Whereas with sci-fi, I'm kind of passionate about the genre and like certain subgenres like cyberpunk that I can really kind of do something original with it. So it's like every time I do fantasy, it just feels very unoriginal.
Okay. And so when sci-fi comes about, or do you find yourself more of like sort of that future what if sort of, Jules Verne or Star Trekky type of thing, or is it more of the um like the sci-fi like that, like a cyberpunk or maybe even a Blade Runner sort of where it's just more of a future, is it technology based or is it more about the I don't know, the aura or the time period.
I'd say I definitely lean more into like the cyberpunk Blade Runner. Like I do tend to do a lot of cyberpunk stuff, but I have done other things as well. Like I kind of consider myself a student of Rod Serling, Twilight Zone, like
Okay.
that kind of brand of science fiction where you're kind of telling different morality tales with like the code of science fiction as a way to kind of present it in a more palatable form. That's kind of a storytelling method that I find very attractive.
Okay. And so when you are first developing a story or something's happening, that to where that you're maybe you got a prompt from somebody or maybe you're talking, what is generally speaking, what is the thing that nowadays what inspires you to write? Like what is the thing that normally, or how does that come about for you to
It's
when you
usually I start with like the genesis of an idea, like a kind of a kernel, and I let it tumble around in my head for a little while, kind of like forming it out. And then once it's kind of at the point where I feel like I can go forward with it, I write out an outline, like an overview, and then kind of go to script form from there. Sometimes it can take months or even years for an idea to kind of tumble around in my head before I feel like it's right. Like, like I could just be in a pool and I could have an idea of like, oh, what if I did a story of like Aquaman meets Iron Man kind of thing, and then go from there, and and then write a 4-page script about it, which is something I may or may not have done.
Mhm. Right. So, okay. So like that, yeah. So once the idea starts to formulate, you go towards outline and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um, when you, what it, what is? I always ask this question of everybody, no matter what it is, but I always try to ask it a little different every time because I think it's important. Um, like okay, so now you've got an idea. Now it's been up there for a little while. You are you're inspired. You go ahead, you get sit down in your chair, you pull up your laptop or whatever, you open up the word processor. What's the first thing you do? What is the very first thing you do?
Outline. Like let's say I'm doing let's just say a comic book script. I'll do an outline of what it is. And by what an outline is like it's more of just like more of kind of like a minute, like a little miniature short story where I say, okay, this happens in the story, and just it's just kind of like a plot overview of like the basics, like the story beats and kind of where it happens. And usually when I'm creating a new IP, I like to do the complete first story arc at the same time. So, like, let's say a story arc is 4 issues, I outline the first 4 issues and then I write those issues. Because like I've had a problem in the past where I have this idea, I write a first issue, and then I'm like, I have no idea where to go from here, and then
Hmm.
those scripts kind of just sit on my hard drive, and I'm like, I'm gonna get to them one day, kind of thing.
Okay. So when so you sit down, you outline. Do you first? use like a bullet point system, or do you plot yourself out for the full arc first? Like, and I say that as in like some people will, like you said, you want the whole arc to be there, but some people will literally um sit there and go, okay, every single point and every beat they want to make. Others will just give themselves like starter points, like say like just a sentence or just a headline that sort of gives them. What would you say? How would you do that? How do you
Uh,
begin breaking it down, or do you first want to make sure you have that entire story before you start to break it down?
um, Usually, when I'm in the outline phase, I usually just like to just do the outlines for each issue and kind of build off from there.
Oh,
So often, sometimes I'll have like hit happens here, but like sometimes I'll have like holes. And so what I do is I just create the story and I write around it. And usually, once the whole story is created, I can fill in the hole better because like I know where things kind of go. Like I kind of go like an A B C, like this happens, this happens, this happens. And a lot of times the scripting process is just kind of connecting those plots, those kind of markers, if you will.
right. And so let's say so you sat down, you sort of plotted, and did your outline first. Then you sit down and you start going. Do you go page by page, panel by panel next, or do you just
All right, so,
fill in basic details of what each thing is going to be before you actually start writing a full script, or what is the next step
uh,
after?
I mean, panel by panel, that we're talking the finalized script there. Like that's when I get into the finalized script.
Okay.
So usually I kind of like basically my writing process is a lot of times has always been like I'm it's the script the story is a movie in my head and I'm just
Hmm.
writing it down like I'm playing out the movie in my head and then I'm just kind of
Hmm.
translating it to the script or the story or whatever medium I'm writing in, and it's usually like I'm playing because like I'm very imaginative and so like really the plot points in the outline are more just like if I get stuck, like if I don't know where to go, that is kind of they're kind of signposts that kind of guide me
Hmm.
on my way. It's more just like that, so that I don't get stuck and scrap the project. So at least I know where things are. I know where the train is going, if you will.
Right. Right. And so for when you're going through, because again, this is just I am just asking because some people I know, I've literally talked to people in this that they basically just kind of write as they go, and I've talked to people who they want to have very solid three three act structures, and I've talked to people who um just they try to make sure that they have a certain amount of action for a certain amount of everything. And then like I said, I actually know someone who works in the mainstream industry right now that they they write when they write, they literally just they have the idea in their head and they know how many pages each part is going to be, and they sit down and they say page 1 panel 1, this is what happens, page 2 or 1 panel 2, this is what happens, and they just literally write that. They don't even plot, they don't bullet point, they just sit down and write it
Well, that
out.
person's a braver person than I am. I'll say that much.
Yeah.
I'd like to say I'm kind of like in the middle ground. Like I know like the common discussion of architect and gardener. When it comes to writing, it's more of a George. That's kind of what George R. R. Martin put it. I'd say I'm kind of
Yeah.
like 1/3 architect and a bit gardener. Like I kind of like to have a basic outline, but like when it comes to the script writing process, I just kind of go as I go. Like sometimes I'll be writing and I'll just abandon portions of the outline because like okay, well this is actually working better. I want to go in this direction,
Right.
and I got to reorganize things. And to me, that's kind of part of the fun of the process is discovering the story as you write it because it's almost like reading the story yourself. It's like you're experiencing the story as you're writing it, and I do find a certain amount of joy in that.
So when like thinking of like all the different ways you can write, whether it be a novel or whatever, do you almost always end up with a manuscript before you break it down for say a comic book, or do you write specific to the medium?
I write specific to the medium. Uh, Basically, once I get to the outline stage, that's when I go straight into the scripting. Because I just don't really see a point of doing a manuscript. Um, because in my opinion, then I have to translate that. It gives more effort to translate that to a script instead of just going straight to. I find working into the medium actually helps it better for panel flow and whatnot, because manuscript, is prose, is so different from scripting that it can be hard to adapt it sometimes. And honestly, I've never even thought about doing a manuscript and then turning it into a script. It's just like idea, outline, script. It's just one stream.
Okay. Yeah. I know the biggest reason why I know people who do that is because most of the people that do that are ones who they kind of start with the dialogue. Because I know a couple of writers that they start with the dialogue and then move back to the actual scenes and everything. And so,
I'm very much a plot and world building kind of
yeah,
person. I very much enjoy creating plots, creating characters, seeing how
right,
things interact. I even enjoy choreographing action scenes and whatnot. So
right.
dialogue is important, but it's more of a tool than anything else.
Okay, so we're gonna move forward and say you've gone through, you've got a 4 issue arc in a comic book format,
Okay.
and you've written what you mainly do. Now we're gonna move into, like, do you do multiple drafts and revisions? Do you do editing? Do you have somebody that you pay
Yes,
or
yes,
give to?
and also yes.
So what is the next step? Take me to the next
Okay. I
couple of
write
steps
this. I
after
write.
you're done.
All right. So I do the script, which my scripts are page, panel, then dialogue. I have a certain format I do. It's not like a standard format, but it's a format that I use that I've created for like readability. It's like page one, and then there's like PNL one, and then I do like 1 or 2 sentences describing what goes on in the panel. I try to do just enough so the artist knows what to do, but I try to leave enough for the artist to kind of put their own stamp on it, because I feel like that's very important. And then I have my dialogue, the
Mhm.
characters talking, and there's certain rules for that. We can kind of get into that later if we want, and then so on and so forth. But like once I'm done with the script, I might kind of look it over again, but I always kind of hand it off to an editor. I have some people I pay for that. I feel like that's kind of really important to have an editor that you trust, that you work well with, but at the same time, an editor that will call you out on your stuff, and whatnot, because it's sometimes really important to have another eye on these kind of things.
Mhm. And so how many like revisions or drafts do you think you would go through before you end up saying, okay, this is what's going to the artist?
It varies. I will say this: my first draft hardly ever is the one you see on the printed page. Like
Hmm.
never. Usually, it's between 3 and 6, sometimes more. I've had as much as 10 drafts. Sometimes they can be as little as like a sentence here or there, but I'm very archival with my stuff, so like I'll just put another version number on it.
Hmm.
But usually it's between 3 and 6 as I'd say is my draft, just off the top of my head, really.
Okay. And then so now that you've got a version that you're going to send that you think is good enough to send, or it's ready to be sent to the artist, is it still a dialogue back and forth between you and the artist, or do you hand it off and say, okay, make it for me? And what is the
It is a dialogue. Um,
okay?
like usually, um, the first thing we'll do is the character designs, because those are twofold. One, it saves time, because like it saves time for in the process, but also it helped when I have a specific art style in mind. Usually, during the character design process, you can kind of help nail down the art style better.
Hmm.
And then work with the character designs, and then from there, the artist will usually thumbnail it, roughs, and then they'll kind of send it to me, and I'll give them tweaks and working with it. Um, and it's a very sometimes it can be a very iterative process. Sometimes they'll say, hey, I want this changed. Sometimes they'll say, hey, I don't think it should be changed because it'll because X, Y, and Z, because I'm they'll use their expertise and kind of show like, and I'll be like, okay, I trust your judgment. Let's go your way, kind of stuff. It's it's very back and forth. Like I find artists that I trust, because like I recognize I'm not an artist and I don't know I don't know much about art. Like I know what I want, so I try to find artists that I trust. And my thing is like, I hired you to do art. I trust you to do the art stuff. I mean, sometimes I might want something tweaked, but usually when it comes to like the technical aspect, I trust the artist to do what they're paid to do.
All right. And so, do you have the dialogue already set before you send it off to the to get drawn, or does the dialogue
Yeah.
come later? Is it a Marvel method
Oh,
sort of thing?
Oh no. The final script includes dialogue, panel breakdowns, the whole shebang.
Okay.
Like when the artist is doing the thing, they have the dialogue in that script.
Okay. And do you employ, like for comic books, do you employ a separate person to um, do the lettering, or do you do it, or how do you do that?
I usually employ a letterer. I have worked with artists in the past who have done their own lettering for like mixed results and whatnot. But yeah, usually I kind of employ my own letterer and colorist and whatnot. I have kind of done some experiments coloring myself. I don't think I'm quite yet ready for part time for the full time yet, but maybe in the future.
Okay. And so these are the last couple of questions that I actually we're gonna kind of go over, and that is, one is, what, now that you've had a few things under your belt and you've really you've gotten yourself out there, what is one of the things that you feel is the most important development? What thing spawned the most important development, or what thing did you learn that really sort of made you the storyteller you are? Or maybe it can be something you had to learn not to do that would
Don't be an a-hole. Don't be
Okay.
an a-hole. How you treat your coworkers is exceedingly important. Not just your two people you work with, but your customers. Respect the people who pay your bills. I mean, this is just more general practice stuff. But like as a writer, one of the big things was definitely to script out a whole storyline before, because I ran into that problem a few times.
Mm.
But just you are who your reputation is, and you got to be as good a person as you can be.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's it's interesting because one of my big the things that I always say that was one of my big like developments, or like an aha moment, was when I figured out how to show not tell. And that's even in prose form, whereas even like in a novel, I had a tendency to tell you what was going on
Yeah,
rather than
that's kind
show
of
it to
like
you.
getting back to the comment I made about Todd McFarlane in Spider-Man #1. That issue is a perfect example of tell not show, because like there's only like 3 or 4 word bubbles in that whole entire comic book. It's all captions. It's like it's the syndrome I like to call artist who thinks they can write syndrome.
Yeah.
Because like I've seen so many artists, when they write, they do exactly the same thing. They treat it more like a novel.
Right.
And then also subtlety. Like people really need to bring back subtlety more. I think that's something that's really lacking in modern media. Like we need more 3-dimensional characters. You can't just define your characters by like 1 or 2 traits. Like people really want to dig into these characters and find out what makes them tick. That's why characters like Batman and Magneto really stood the test of time, while other ones have fallen by the wayside.
Right. And so, for advice that you would give to young writers or people just starting out, or I guess even older people in their 60s or 70s that never thought they could write, but maybe they're considering trying to write something down, I always like to make a case or ask somebody to make a case for them to just start writing. So, what would you say to a person who's like, they have an idea, they have a thought, and they're not, they just haven't sat down and written yet, and they're not sure if they can? What would you say to them?
Passion is key. If the story idea that you have, if it doesn't excite you, if it doesn't fill you with joy, if it doesn't make you want to run to your laptop and start writing it right away, it's
Hmm.
not worth pursuing. Like, I know that's kind of harsh, but because like this stuff is a grind. It's a long marathon, and if you don't absolutely love the story you're creating, if you don't absolutely love what you're doing, you're gonna burn out. It's this is not a field you can just come in, collect your paycheck, and go. You gotta love what you're doing.
Right, right, absolutely, yeah. And the first thing I would say to a person for me is, and I say this every time I do a thing, I say just write, just sit down and write, even if it's bad. Write
Your
something
first
that's
draft is gonna be
terrible.
crap regardless. No matter
Right.
what you do, your first draft is gonna be crap.
Well, even
Embrace it.
great writers start out as bad writers, and then they learn how to be good writers before they
Yeah,
become
what's
great
the what's
writers.
the what's that phrase? It's like 10,000 hours to be a master. Maybe for a writer, it's like you got to get your bad 10,000 words out or whatever.
Yeah, you
Um,
have to get a lot out, and I tell people to write short, really short stories that just write a bunch of them. Just write a
yeah,
ton.
yeah,
Write a
that's what I
ton
did.
until you figure it out. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and like it may be years before you're ready to submit to people. I mean, heck, um, it was probably 10 years before I really started making like moves and stuff in the industry. It wasn't until late teens that I really started making any motions, and that was with me, doing stuff. So stuff takes time, and that's
right,
okay.
right. All right. So I'm gonna bring up 2100. I hope I'm saying that right. 2100 or
Yeah, it's
Samurai
the
issue
2100.
2.
Yeah, it comes. Yeah, 2100 comes first. You've been doing it right the whole time.
All right. I just making sure I didn't. So I could just imagine I've been saying it the whole time, saying it, and then it's like, no, it's 2100. It's like, oh crap. No, but
No, like I've had people say Samurai 2100, and I just don't bother correcting them because like I don't want to be an a hole about it. Like I'm
yeah.
I'm already I'm already a guest on their show. They're already sticking their neck out for me. I don't want to be that guy.
All right. But so tell me about it. Tell me what. Tell me.
So it's like a kind of a man on a time story. You got this guy named Gile. He was a samurai in the Songo region of Japan, which is kind of like an isolated island. Um, and one day a portal opens up where him and his fiancee Mishi travel through it to the cyberpunk future of 2100, and it's kind of a lawless land, and eventually they get attacked by people, and then Mishi goes missing, and so Kiro is left in this strange land. He has no idea how it works, all the societal conventions or whatever. He meets this woman named Tyler, which is a woman you see in the corner of that picture, and they kind of form like a yin yang kind of partnership where like, sure, Kiro can kick butt and take names, but like he doesn't know the social customs, and then but Tyler is very street smart, but not the most physically adept. I mean, he's reasonable enough for her age and gender. So they kind of complement each other and whatnot. And then by the end of issue 2, the status quo is set, and the adventurers can move forward.
And so then tell me about the featured perk. $50 and
So with the featured perk, basically you get everything. Like, well, it's kind of like the catch up tier. I don't want to say everything because like there's some exclusive stuff there, other tiers, but like you get issues 1 and 2, and then you get I did 2 trading card sets. I did a trading card set for the first issue of 3 cards, and then I'm doing another set of 3 cards, and then with this tier you get an exclusive 7th card. It's spoiler for the book, but it's all good. And then you also get digital copies of issue 1 and 2.
okay. And so who is your artist on this?
So the cover artist The man who did the cover is a guy named Arvell Jones. He's
Mm-hmm.
a former Marvel and DC artist. He's like the co-creator of Misty Knight, and he's worked on like Iron Fist, All Star Squadron. Just all around really cool guy. And then the artist for the interiors is a guy named Ryan Q. He's a South American artist that I found online, and he's a pretty cool guy.
Okay, that's awesome. And so is I didn't pay attention. Is it black and white or is it color? What are
The
we?
interiors are black and white, yes.
Okay, cool.
I was
Yeah,
trying to kind of like blend American style with manga style a little
uh-huh,
bit. It's kind of what I was trying to go for.
right. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's I've always liked black and white art, so I'm good with that. But
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, that's awesome, man. Um, and so with this, the I have a link in the description for anybody that would like to check this out, see what's going on with it. Back at today, it says it's going to be fulfilling in December. Is of
Actually,
this?
I'm actually fulfilling right now.
Okay,
Um, any Basically any tier that doesn't include the trading cards, I'm actually shipping out tomorrow. And
okay,
then the trading cards, I'm shooting for August. That's my current plan. It may change, but that's kind of what I'm shooting for. But any non trading card, I'll ship out
hmm,
tomorrow. And if you get anything non trading card, I think Backer Gogo has the trading cards in it as well. I can ship it out like pretty much immediately because the books are already printed.
right. Okay. And so with that, we have pretty much come to the end. This is the sort of things that, asking just because I just wanted to, touch base on sort of the beginnings and see the writing process through. The last thing I would question I have is just um, when it comes to like uh, storytelling, like you said, you've written novels and you've written comics. Um, how much visualization do you do when making a comic compared to a novel? What
Uh,
is how much would you say is done in your head and
quite
explained
a
out?
bit. I'd say the only difference is, um, like I may think in motion, but there's also kind of have like that added layer of like putting into panels like panel flow and whatnot. Like when I'm doing comic book panels, I tend to kind of treat it like almost like I'm writing a song, and by that I mean like with songs you have like highs, lows. Songs are very like conflict resolution, like shave and haircut, 2 bits, like that kind of stuff. So it's like there's an ebb and a flow to it. So like when I'm writing these comics, like there's always kind of like moment, the peaks and the valleys, and sometimes I have moments that just hit, or like when I'm writing action scenes, I'll tend to do more panels like dialogue lists or and then but when I'm doing dialogue scenes, it's less panels, kind of give the dialogue more chance to breathe. And then like my approach to dialogue, I'm very like Tarantino-ish, Quentin Tarantino, the way he does dialogue. I try to emulate that kind of like very casual style to it. The worst thing you can have is to have them talk like screenwriters, and I
Right,
try to avoid that.
right. And so the for anybody who's interested in reaching out for you or anything like that, Twitter is the best place to get you. Where would you
Yeah, Twitter is what
send
I'm most
people?
active on. I'm also on YouTube. Just search the Phoenix Press.
Okay.
Um, and yeah,
All right then. So with that, we have come to the end of this episode. Just a little bit over 30 minutes, but we're getting better at actually getting people out of here on time, I guess. So I just want to say that thank you to the Phoenix Press and Nick for the time that he spent here. And I hope that anybody who's listening just takes, if nothing else, about this, what he had said about passion. that I think passion is really, really, really crucial. But also, you can develop passion. You can have an
Yeah.
idea and just write it down, and then, just the idea out on like a note or something, and go away for a second. Watch some stuff, watch some movies, watch some TV. Come back, get you're psyched up for it.
Sometimes the
Bring your
best thing you can
passion
do is
to it.
just kind of let it sit, let it kind of fall to the wayside. Then you pick it up. You're like, oh crap, I remember this.
Right. And so with that, I would like to encourage anybody who's listening to this in the future, that just write, man. And everybody can write. We're all storytellers. I mean, even if you've never formally written down, you've told a lot, and that's telling a story. And so we can all be storytellers. And I encourage everybody to sit down and write it. Just take out your phone.
Remember, Middle Earth started with the words, in a hole there lived a hobbit. While J.R. Tolkien was grading papers, he scribbled that on paper. That is what spawned the Lord of the Rings. Those words spawned an entire series. So if he can do that, you can do it. You can do it as well.
Right. Yeah. And again, just write. Just have yourself. Just don't even worry if it's good or bad. Just do what you got to do. Just come up with something. Put it down. Put it on paper. Take your cell phone out and take the recording and just record your voice. Record your telling a story.
Whatever you got to do.
Right. Figure out a beginning, a middle, and end, and then tell the story. And it's your story.
Take a stick and scratch it in the dirt if you have to.
Right. And remember, this is your story. Other people might give you, input or whatever, but it's your story to tell. And so it's going to come from you. And so no matter what happens, I encourage you to continue telling stories, but try to tell good stories, and try to make sure that you remember to include a good guy. Even if the good guy always, try to include a good guy. And try to take advice from people around you, because they're not being they are trying to help you. And with that, I thank you for watching. And if you've liked it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. This is YouTube. We have to say all that. Of course, you have to share it out that's really the way anybody knows about anything. And as I say every single time, if you hated it, please, I insist that you go ahead and give it a thumbs down and leave really, really mean comment in the comment section about why it sucked and why you hate so much. And if it is mean enough, I will indeed not only respond, but I might even pin it. And with that, I'm the Christian Nomad, and I thank you for watching, and God bless.